No, joining me now in the studio is former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott, the man who famously stopped the boats. And I hear Tony, or I recall, famously tried to square up to Putin back when MH17 was downed by the Russians. You've met this guy. What's your thoughts on what's happened in the last 48 hours and how long he can cling on in the Kremlin?
There's no doubt, Camilla, that Putin regards himself as on a mission from God to recreate the Russia of Peter the Great. And that's why the Ukraine war is so important, because if Ukraine were to fall back into the Russian orbit, there's no doubt that the Baltic states, Georgia, Moldova and Poland would be next, because as far as he's concerned, these are the greater Russian motherlands, and he feels that his mission is to get them back. He thinks that the greatest catastrophe of the 20th century was the breakup of the old Soviet Union, and that's why he's such a very dangerous person who does have to be stopped.
Although, is he less dangerous or more dangerous this morning? I mean, obviously this attempted coup has very much weakened his position. It's made Russians question whether he should go on any longer. What's your view?
Well, we don't really know exactly what's happened. Obviously, there is a problem between him and the Wagner Group. It can't help but do damage. But on the other hand, there's still a long way for this to play out. The Ukrainians are doing their best to punch their way through very significant Russian defences right now. I don't think any of us can be happy until every last inch of Ukraine is liberated from every last Russian soldier.
Were you of the opinion at the time when Crimea was invaded that the West was a bit asleep at the wheel? I mean, did we do too much to try and bring Putin in? Well, actually, we should have been more wary of what he was capable of.
Camilla, this is the second invasion. The first invasion took place in 2014. And frankly, it was a very tepid response back then. Then, of course, in the week before February the 24th, you had people like President Biden saying that maybe a minor incursion could be tolerated. Since the invasion, I think that the West, in many respects led by Britain, has responded magnificently. But in the end, the Ukrainians can't win without help, because they need the heavy weaponry to match the heavy weaponry that the Russians have got in abundance. It's great that tanks and longer-range missiles and armoured vehicles and what have you have been supplied, but they do need more. The problem at the moment is that they don't have, not only do they lack air superiority, but it's even hard to contest the airspace, given that they just don't have enough modern aircraft. And I think if the West is serious about ensuring that the Ukrainians have a win rather than just a bloody stalemate, jets such as the F-16 have to be provided.
Is Biden just too weak?
I don't say he's too weak, but I think there is a degree of caution on the part of NATO collectively. Some countries are more forward-leaning. The Poles and the Eastern Europeans are very forward-leaning. Britain has been very forward-leaning. The French and the Germans have been the laggards here. Joe Biden has been trying to keep the show together. But in the end, Ukraine is fighting for the freedom of all of us, and all of us should do our bit to help. If they're the ones that are going to have to fight and die, at the very least, we can give them the weapons they need to win.
Let's bring it back to domestic matters now. I know you've been in the UK for some time. You were at an event that Boris Johnson was speaking at earlier in the week. What's your characterisation of how Rishi Sunak is doing right now?
It's very difficult to be the fifth Prime Minister in a continuum of government. I think he's doing a very good job under excuse me, difficult circumstances. I always say that the important thing is to create a contest. That's how I succeeded as an opposition leader, and I tried to continue as Prime Minister. create a contest with the other side. And
Do you think he should be deploying more attack lines on Labour? I mean, Frank Luntz apparently gave the Conservative Party, the 1922 committee, some advice, and they said, you're just going to have to go negative because no one's being positive about conservatism right now.
I think that the negative is important in politics, but you've also got to have a positive agenda of your own. If the Conservatives get another term, what is going to be different and better? Are they going to, for instance, drop the ban on diesel and petrol-powered cars?
I mean, do you think it's foolhardy, this net zero target, the Conservatives concentrating on green levies, putting green levies on energy bills? We're already struggling with our energy bills.
Well, certainly if this was back in Australia and it was the coalition that was doing this, I'd be very much against it. I don't want to be giving too much explicit advice to a brother political party. But in the end, what's more important, keeping the lights on or getting emissions down? What's more important, keeping your industries alive or this green nirvana that we're all aiming for? And my fear is that it's only in the West that we obsess about emissions. China's not worried about it. Russia's not worried about it. India is not that worried about it because they're concerned with giving their people affordable, reliable power so that they can lift them out of poverty. And it does, I've got to say, look a lot like a green vanity project on the part of the West. And I don't believe that we should continue with green vanity projects, particularly when they're doing so much, they're putting so much extra costs on our economy.
Let me ask you about immigration. Obviously, we've got this vow from Rishi Sunak that's very much reminiscent of your vow to stop the boats. So far, no one's been deported to Rwanda. Do you think they're executing this policy adequately? It's not working for them, is it?
Well, again, I think they're on the right track. One of the things that the Howard government did and then my government did was we had offshore processing. We sent people to Nauru and to PNG. I think all credit to the British government for getting this deal with Rwanda, but it's not much of a deal if you can't actually get the people to take off and land in Rwanda. And
so what does he need to do? Be more bullish with the courts? Just push it through and be robust?
The British Parliament is sovereign, and I can't understand why the British Parliament hasn't passed a law removing the jurisdiction of this European tribunal over British policy. Look, the other thing that we did in Australia was we turned boats around because in the end, if people can get here, they will be tempted to come here.
So should we be doing that in the Channel, turning them around?
I appreciate that France is a different country to Indonesia, and we were turning boats around back to Java. But to be honest, Camilla, it's frankly an unfriendly act on the part of the French not to police these camps better, not to stamp out the people smuggling gangs better. And if the French aren't prepared to do their job, if the French are prepared to, at least in part, facilitate what at a sufficiently large scale starts to become a peaceful invasion, well, I think Britain must be prepared to say, well, they're coming from France. They have no right to come from France. The way is shut. We send them back. OK. Now,
I'm intrigued that you gave this speech in London earlier this week where you asked, what has gone wrong with centre-right politics? Is it our leaders or our beliefs, or has the world changed? What was your conclusion?
Well, it's a bit of all three, but I think that there is a way forward. I think we need leaders with conviction and courage. We need to actually believe in our beliefs as opposed to pay them lip service. And the fundamental beliefs of the centre-right of politics are freedom, tradition, and above all else, country. These are the things we stand for: greater freedom, support for tradition, but above all else, we are the patriot parties. And the difficulty today is that just as Reagan and Thatcher were confronting Marxism as represented by the old Soviet Union, we are confronting a kind of cultural Marxism which is rampant inside our institutions. In a sense, it's a more insidious and a more difficult enemy because it's internal. But wherever we see this neo-Marxism, whether it's in the climate cult, the gender fluidity, whatever,
we have to fight
got to stand against it.